What is up, YouTube? 'Tis I, Chaddington, and we are back with another reaction video. This time checking out the animated history of Australia. Now, I've been learning a lot about Australia recently. If you haven't seen my Exploring Australia video, be sure to check that out. But I don't know a lot about the history of Australia. The only thing I've ever heard is that it was started by like British prisoners or something. I don't even know if that's true, but we're about to find out. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's go.
Aristotle, Ptolemy, and Macrobius believed that there was far too much land in the northern hemisphere, and that there must be some undiscovered continent balancing the globe somewhere in the south. Okay, so the logic was a little flawed, but during the Age of Discovery, the search was on for Terra Australis Incognita. Fast forward a few centuries to the East Indies. 3 Dutch sailors landed in Australia accidentally in the 1600s. The mythical southern continent had just been found.
Okay, that's big. Dutch sailors were the first to discover it. That's interesting. 1600s.
Australia was the last of the New World to be discovered, because let's be honest, nobody cares about Antarctica. Australia was of course already inhabited. Indigenous Australians, also known as, had a population of between 300 and 700,000.
Oh yeah, I know that. I've seen people play that instrument before. I forget what it's called. I assume that that's native to Australia. Interesting.
By modern estimates. Early contacts with these tribes were as often peaceful as they were violent. It is thought that these groups arrived in 2 stages. The first was from the Indian subcontinent via a land bridge that connected Australia to the island of New Guinea, bringing with them the Pama-Nyungan language family. The second wave was much later and may have been groups related to the Austronesians of Indonesia. Their culture and history was preserved through the oral tradition. The Dutch named the island New Holland after the county of Holland in the Netherlands.
Okay, before we go on, I think that's interesting. If I recall correctly, America, the first people to come to America also came there via a land bridge, but it was like from the north, basically. Well, I guess it's the same way here. This land bridge was from the north as well. So that's interesting. And I guess after they came over, like the continent broke off.
But it wasn't until the British landed on the east coast and named it New South Wales that Europeans began to settle. Landing in Port Jackson on the 26th of January 1788, hey, that's today, the so-called First Fleet arrived to found the colony of Sydney, with the intention of using the labour of prisoners to achieve wealth for Britain. However,
Now, 1789, isn't that the same year the French Revolution was taking place, if I recall my history correctly? Okay, but this is when the British show up to Australia.
contrary to Australia's convict founding myth, less than half of this First Fleet were actually convicts. In the 1800s, Australia...
Okay, less than half were convicts. So that answers that question. I mean, still, but like, that's not an insignificant amount.
was circumnavigated, mapped, and new colonies started springing up all over. Hobart, Newcastle, Launceston, Port Macquarie, Brisbane, and Melbourne, with dozens of penal centres. Adelaide and Perth were founded as free settlement cities, but the latter was made into a penal colony after it failed to grow naturally. As the Europeans expanded, the frontier wars began with the Aboriginals, many of whom were hostile to the foreign invaders. Most famously, the Black War of Tasmania, which nearly wiped out the indigenous Tasmanians. But far more destructive to the Aboriginals was smallpox, which killed tens of thousands.
Okay, well, first of all, that's very unfortunate. And again, very similar to the New World in America. Smallpox just wiped out tons of the people who were there. But question I have, based on the animation, were boomerangs used as weapons? I just thought they were a thing that like native people used to have fun, like throw around like a football. Well, I guess now that I think about it, you don't want a massive piece of wood flying through the air and hit you in the face. That would probably hurt.
Australia's growth would stagnate until the 1850s gold rush, which drew hundreds and thousands of settlers from all around the world in search for wealth.
Once again, same thing in America. We had the California gold rush. I feel like it was probably around the same time period in the 1800s, which drew like a ton of people all searching for gold.
Particularly in New South Wales and what would become Victoria. This would forever change Australia's character, with new free settlers overshadowing its convict past, bringing with them their ideas of European Enlightenment, the American self-determinism, and the Chinese hatred for the British. These gold diggers became discontent with the corrupt and badly run colonial elites and rose up in rebellion.
Why did the Chinese hate the British? I don't think like the Brits ever tried to like colonize China or anything. Maybe it was like a trade war thing, like they're Ships were always getting in fights. I don't know. I have no idea.
In the infamous Eureka Stockade. These settlers were beginning to feel a sense of nationalism, that perhaps Australia could be something different. The winds of change were on Terra Australis, and soon, large-scale trade unions developed in Australia's largely working-class population from the ideas of orthodox Marxists. Trade unions still hold a significant influence over Australian politics today.
But let's not forget the rift that had been forming between Australia and Australians, the government and its people. Thousands of ex-convicts were being released each year, most of them turning to civil jobs, but a sizable minority turned to Australia's bushy frontier for freedom and profits. Policing was harsh, but order couldn't reach far enough. Outside of the cities, only personal gain and wealth could drive law enforcement. Money would change hands and lips were sealed. In this climate, an Australian icon was born, Ned Kelly. Famous for his tin hat Robin Hood thievery, infamous for his cop killing and town raids, and recognisable everywhere for that nifty bulletproof suit.
Whoa. That is insane. Is that the actual suit this guy would wear? Also, I do see some holes in it, so I don't know if it's completely bulletproof, but still, that is terrifying, but also probably extremely cumbersome. Yeah, that is crazy. I've never seen anything like that.
For more on one of the most well-known cornerstones of Australian folklore, go to my channel, Feature History, and check out my video on Old Ned.
Okay, so besides bulletproof suits or whatever, most Aussie colonies were granted self-governing status and united to form the Commonwealth of Australia in 1901, a dominion of the British Crown.
Okay, so 1901, Melbourne and Sydney couldn't agree who would be the capital, so Canberra, which was about half the way between, was selected instead. Okay, I know that because people commented on one of my Exploring Australia videos and said that. So in 1901, we get some degree of independence. What's being implied by the narrator here is that it was still kind of owned by Britain, but yet it's also kind of independent.
The new Australian government was very quick to open up a new dark chapter in Aboriginal history, the infamous Stolen Generation. Beginning in 1905, the government began rounding up half-castes, a term which is now highly offensive, and settled them into white families with the intention of breeding out their Aboriginal blood in a form of cultural genocide. Abuses of these children were also rampant, which is a rather depressing segue into the White Australia policy, a set of strict settlement acts which
Hold on, I gotta hear that again. I didn't quite get it.
highly offensive, and settled them into white families with the intention of breeding out their Aboriginal blood in a
Settled them into white families with the intention of breeding out their Aboriginal blood. Yikes.
form of cultural genocide.
Cultural genocide, yeah, I was about to say, I guess it couldn't have been based on anything like ethnicity or genetics per se if you have the intention of having them like mix with the new population of Australians. So it's a cultural genocide. And they didn't exactly explain what the term half caste actually refers to. I assume that just means like an Aboriginal person. Not sure exactly.
Abuses of these children were also rampant, which is a rather depressing segue into the White Australia policy, a set of strict settlement acts which restricted immigration from anyone who wasn't British or Northern European up until about the Second World War. As a British colony, Australia would unilaterally declare war on Germany during the First World War, forming the Australia and New Zealand Army Corps, or ANZACs. The young nation was sent headfirst into war, and 500,000 soldiers volunteered, or nearly 1/10 of the total population. The baptism of fire came during the Gallipoli campaign, when more than 8,000 men lost their lives in the failed invasion of Turkey, an event etched into the memory of the Australian zeitgeist.
Whoa, so they invaded Turkey. I don't even recall Turkey being involved in World War One. But man, shout out to the Australians. As someone who's of Armenian heritage, way to go to attack Turkey. I really appreciate it. For those of you who don't know, the Armenian genocide, which happened, I think probably around this time actually, was a genocide that was committed by the Turks, and over 1 million Armenians were killed. So, man, Respect to Australia.
Although crippled from the Great Depression, Australia again took up arms in 1939 to support her mother nation in the Second World War, this time fighting in Europe, North Africa, the Pacific and South Asia. Prisoners of war in Malaya, Burma and Thailand were treated inhumanely by the Japanese, who also bombed Australia's northern coast about 100 times.
Whoa, I didn't know that. Australia was bombed by Japan? I didn't know anything about Australia's involvement in World War II either.
It is still a very young nation, but it has emerged a very powerful force in the region, now a beacon of democracy, social progressivism and commerce, with its phenomenal urbanization consistently ranked among the world's most livable cities. Walking the line between left and right with generous social programs, universal suffrage, a welcoming immigration policy, and attractive business prospects. This is John. John wants to learn how to play the didgeridoo he bought from a garage sale, but the lessons are expensive, so John will probably give up. But wait, John, you can learn for free over at Skillshare.
I play a few instruments. Should I add the didgeridoo to my repertoire? Who knows? Okay, this is random, but someone in the comments mentioned the emu occupation of Perth, and I have to know what that is. And right below it says the Great Emu War. I have to know what that is referring to. Great Emu War, spelled it wrong, was a military operation in Western Australia in 1932 to control the emu population. The operation was a response to farmers' complaints about emus destroying their crops. The operation was unsuccessful and the media dubbed it the Emu War. A drought drove 20,000 emus into farming areas. They called in the artillery to eliminate them. Lewis guns, goodness gracious. They killed fewer than 1,000 emus. The operation was a failure and the media ridiculed Australia for it. Just to remind myself, what is an emu? Oh yeah, these things. There's an insurance company in America called Liberty Mutual, and their mascot is an emu, and I hate those commercials. They drive me insane. They're awful, but it's an interesting looking bird. Yeah, I don't want to get in a fight with this thing. The Great Emu Wars, how emus defeated the Australian army. This picture is amazing. Should that be the next thing I check out? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below, guys, if there are any other videos you want me to check out. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.